now. It's the Finding Your Spine podcast with host Chase Spears.
You could sign up to get the shot. And I looked at the list and I was the only officer within my company who was not getting the shot. And I know other company commanders were trying to influence their guys to get the shot. I know the group commander held a meeting with all the company commanders and he asked, raise your hand if you didn't get the shot. If you get the shot, you're a terrible leader. I'm going to get you out of your company. I'm going to get you out of your command.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Finding Your Spine, a podcast where we call men and women of moral principle to get out of the shadows and to put the truth to work in your lives, leadership, and workplaces. I'm Chase Spears, and I'm here today with former U.S. Army Captain and Green Beret, John Frankman. John served in the Army for 8 years as a Special Forces soldier, and that's very, very important. We're going to talk about that a lot in this discussion. He left the Army voluntarily in 2023 over the unlawful COVID shot mandate, and ever since then, he has been an ever-present, ardent, and forceful voice for those in the military who were absolutely betrayed by that order. Captain Frankman concluded his career as a detachment commander in the U.S. Army's 7th Special Forces Group located in Destin, Florida. He's a former congressional candidate and has written about and been widely interviewed about this in places all over the place. The Floridian, Daily Signal, Breitbart, and he's appeared all over the podcast scene. I can't believe he's actually willing to come on mine, but I'm thrilled that he's willing to add this to his media repertoire, which is very broad. So, John, I'm just thrilled to have you today. Thanks so much for making the time and coming on.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Chase. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Before we get in depth, tell us a little bit about who John Frankman is. You know, the boy who grew into the man who was willing to literally set aside an extraordinarily promising military career over what you knew to be right.
Yeah, well, I was born in Los Angeles and grew up in the DC metro area. And my parents, they split up when I was 6 and divorced shortly after that. So that was definitely a difficult thing. And one of the blessings from that is not having my dad around as often. I found that God, as my father, had to really develop that relationship. And that identity in Christ was always very strong for me. And exploring different churches and trying to better really have a relationship with him, I ended up converting to Catholicism at the age of 15 and was thinking about the priesthood for a while. So after graduating from college at Wheaton College in Illinois, I spent 4 years studying to become a Catholic priest. And for those who aren't Catholic, it's typically a 6-year timeline. If you already have a college degree, at least it was then. So I did 4 of 6 years, and it was an amazing experience of prayer, learning theology, learning philosophy, really getting to understand yourself, understanding your relationship with Christ, and especially that gift of discernment. And that gift of discernment is something that's been very essential to me within my time in the military, within relationships, and especially in making the choice regarding what to do about the COVID shot, because I wasn't quite sure at first. It wasn't something clear to me.
Yeah, it wasn't something that was clear to a lot of folks. I mean, it just kind of came so rapidly and came out of nowhere so much. And so let me ask you a little bit about your background as a Green Beret. You know what that means. I know why that's such a big deal. I was a conventional soldier. I always kind of looked up to you guys, slightly envied you guys. You got way cooler schools than us conventional guys do. But for those who have no military experience at all, like, why is that such a big deal? What is a Green Beret compared to a normal soldier like myself?
Yeah, so after leaving seminary, I went on to active duty, and I first was an infantry officer, so went to infantry basic officer leadership course, Ranger School, Airborne School. But Special Forces Green Berets, they are a special operations unit. And if you think of it, you have SOCOM, which is Special Operation Command. Within every branch of the military, whether it's Air Force, Navy, Army, you have different special operations components. And in the Army, the 3 different special operations components we have are Special Forces Green Berets, our Ranger Regiment, and Special Operation Aviation Regiment. So you have SOAR, you have Green Berets, you have Ranger Regiment. And Special Forces, we are, if you think of it, we're special. We do special missions. The main thing that separates us from every other special operation force is that we work by, with, and through a partner force. So we learn a language. We are focused regionally. Our main jobs are unconventional warfare and foreign internal defense. Unconventional warfare are activities taken to overthrow, disrupt, coerce a power, a occupying power, a legitimate government through the use of an underground auxiliary resistance force. So if you think of it maybe like Star Wars, where you had the rebels trying to overthrow the Empire, we're the Jedi trying to make that happen. If you have foreign internal defense, that's going into a country trying to bolster and help them to conduct counterinsurgency missions, so trying to get rid of those groups that are trying to delegitimize the legitimate power. So that's really what makes it special. And I was at 7th Special Forces Group. I had to learn Spanish, and that's something that every Green Beret has to do. They have to test in a particular language. So as far as the training, for an officer, you have to be promotable to captain to go to selection, Special Forces Assessment and Selection. That's a 3-week program. When I was there, it was a 35% pass rate. So you go through that 3 weeks, and then I was at Fort Bragg for 2 years to get through the training. Now, they've tried to streamline the pipeline, change it up, but it's always going to be about that year of training, and you're going to go through small unit tactics. You're going to attend survival, evasion, resistance, escape, or SEER school, where you're actually put into a prison camp and taught resistance techniques. You're going to go through Robin Sage, which is an actual mission, and it's a training event where you are pretending to be liberating the state of North Carolina from, the state of Virginia that comes down and attacks you, and your ally is South Carolina. So it's very, very realistic and just an amazing experience. And then on top of that, was able to go to the military freefall course. So was on a military freefall team, had about 50 freefall jumps. Really great experience.
That last one you mentioned is where I especially envied you guys. I went to the basic static line jump course, and every time I got to jump with special forces guys, they would tell me how, I don't stack line anymore. Once you free fall, that's all you do. And I was like, yes, I'm jealous. I kept asking for it, and my commander looked at me like, what do you think you are? I'm like, I like being in the air. What can I say? And so part of being a special forces soldier is, like, you're used to working in environments, you're going and you're doing the missions that we don't hear about, that you go under cover of darkness, you do the things that are very heroic, but no one's going to know about. These are things that are not making the news. And as part of that, you guys are very, very in tune with what a psychological operation looks like. And when we talked a few weeks earlier, you said that made the whole DoD's shift on COVID stand out a little bit more among special forces operators than it did to the conventional force.
So, we are supposed to use psychological operations and themes and messages in our campaign. So when we're planning for Robin Sage, we're getting ready to conduct different missions, and we are having positive propaganda if it goes well, negative propaganda if it goes well, and we're trying to influence that psychological sphere because we're trying to move the population towards us with positive pro-America messages and pro-messages of what we're trying to push forward. So for me, when COVID was coming out, I noticed that there was so much media propaganda that was just saturating the U.S. media and the world media. And that caused me to question what was going on. And I was actually a little disappointed in a lot of my brother Green Berets for not thinking as critically about this as we could have. I remember being in a briefing where the group commander talked about what the repercussions could be in Colombia if they elected a more communist-friendly, more liberal president. And I'm just thinking to myself, well, have you considered the fact that we are now under a communist president in Joe Biden, that he's being extremely destructive to our country? So it really frustrated me, and it frustrated a lot of my NCOs, my detachment, that we weren't thinking more critically about what was going on with COVID, whether we should get the shot or not, whether it was legal or not. And my team sergeant, he put it pretty well that basically, as a Green Beret, when you're given a mission, you ask, well, what's the intent? You might even ask, should we do it? Does it need to be done? You're supposed to think unconventionally. And for him, it was very odd that this was the only thing he felt that he was asked to do or ordered to do, kind of blindly, without reason. And that's something that was disappointing with special operators, but there were a lot of special operators that were able to find ways around getting the shot, maybe getting fake COVID cards, things of that nature.
Yeah, I was talking to Rob Green a few weeks ago, and he said when you're looking at special operators, whether it be in the Army, Navy, or any of the other services, one of the things that makes them unique in this regard is they literally look at their bodies differently than we do in the conventional realm, that you look at your body as a weapon system, and so you're much more judicious about what are you putting into it, whether it be chemicals, whether it be diet, because you have to go without the long supply lines that us conventional guys have to go through. And so I want to go back to pre-2020. If I did my math right, 2020 you'd been in the Army about 5 years. You're moving along. You've served in a basic branch. You have successfully come through Special Forces training, which is absolutely no joke. And things are looking up. Like, you're going to probably be a very successful officer and have a very promising career ahead of you. Talk me through what it was like where you were at, how the career was going, and then all of a sudden it seems like the train takes this hard turn that no one sees coming in 2020.
Yeah, I was at the military freefall course in Yuma, Arizona in March of 2020, which is when COVID hit the United States. So the first 2 weekends we were able to go out. I visited family in Los Angeles. That last weekend we were locked down. Everybody's freaking out over COVID. We're kind of told in the schoolhouse that if you get sick, you have to tell us about the symptoms. We're going to pull you from training, but that's what it is. And I know there's a lot of people who might have felt a little sick. It probably wasn't COVID, but they definitely did not want to lose out on graduating the military freefall course. But I get back to Fort Bragg, and it's basically a ghost town. We're all quarantining. We have to get special memorandums in order to move early to PCS. So we're just sitting there waiting to go. I'm waiting to go to 7th group. I've completed the Q course, qualification course. I've completed the language school, military freefall. I get down to 7th Special Forces group, and I'm definitely excited to take a team. I get to 3rd Battalion, and they had just redeployed from a deployment. And one of the odd things was that there was a transgender officer there, and I had to kind of decide, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to navigate this as a Christian, as someone who really can't lie to someone? So just go about using rank and last name. But yeah, as the COVID shot was coming out, that's when we got into problems in early 2021. I was very open with my team, discussing a number of the facets of it. For me, the first thing that caused me to pause was that it used aborted fetal cells, stem cells in the either testing or production for all the shots that were coming out. But as we kind of waited, we heard more and more about the negative side effects, health side effects of this. So I just continued to pray, to discern. I was really asking the legal assistance for what the policy was, found out that we can neither be coerced or rewarded for whether we get the shot, that there can't be undue command influence, even though that was happening all over the place. And I told my detachment that as their detachment commander, as their senior raider, I would neither punish or reward them based on whether they got the shot, but that I personally wanted to wait until it was mandatory to at least consider getting it. So just went through those months of just praying, discerning, looking for God's peace to really come up with a proper solution. And unfortunately, during that time, my team sergeant was pretty regularly harassed. I had the least vaccinated detachment in all of 7th Special Forces Group. We had a mission taken from us, and this was in June of 2021. The mission was taken from us. Now, the mandate didn't come out until August, so it was preemptive of the mandate. And what a lot of people need to understand is that before the mandate came out, commanders were coming up with all legal, illegal, whatever means they could to coerce, threaten people to get the shot. Whether it was, I heard about one formation where a battalion commander stood in front of the 82nd Battalion and said, hey, if you have the shot, you have the day off. If not, we're going for a long, grueling ruck march, unless you want to go get the shot. And that's something that's going to definitely intimidate a lot of the privates, the lower enlisted, maybe the young officers who don't know their own rights. But yeah, basically went through that kind of period of harassment, of career losses. The biggest career loss for me was I was supposed to go teach at West Point. I was supposed to teach philosophy and an ethics course at West Point, but I was not allowed to PCS or change duty stations, move, while my exemption was pending.
There were so many stories like that, John. I remember in December of 2020, I had a friend. He was stationed up at Joint Base Lewis McChord, which, for anyone who's not familiar, that's near the Seattle-Tacoma, Washington State area. And again, this is 2020. This shot has just come out, but it's by no means mandatory in the military yet. It's still optional. But this is close to Christmas. The entire unit has been put on Christmas leave. And my buddy sent me a message and said, I've just been called back in, and told to report to the hospital and either receive the shot or receive what we call in the military a counseling statement, basically a formal document that explaining why I don't want it, even though it's optional. And he was on leave. He was on vacation time. And I said, why would you even answer that on leave? And of course he did. He went into the hospital. But the harassment is real. I'm looking right now at the piece you just had published in Breitbart, which I really appreciate. And I encourage all the listeners to go look it up. It's titled Exclusive: Green Beret Veteran John Frankman, the Department of Defense's effort to reinstate unvaccinated troops still misses the mark. And you wrote, my team sergeant and I were constantly harassed by the company sergeant major. At one point, he told me I was screwing up my career and that he would kick guys on my team out of the company and send them to undesirable assignments at their vaccine status lost missions. Multiple times he specified this was not a threat, but a promise. And so I know the kind of pressure you were under, and yet you held firm. And this whole podcast is about those who held firm and how did they do it? How did you do it?
It was God. It was trying to pray, trying to discern, figure out what's the right thing. And in Catholicism, one thing is we have the discernment of spirits. That's something that St. Ignatius of Loyola came up with. And I'm a huge fan of his. When I got out of the military, I went on an 8-day silent retreat in his style. And one of those key tenets is that God tries to lead us through peace, through that kind of comfort, through that consolation. But it's the devil, it's the evil powers that can lead us through that discord, through that spiritual discomfort. And you have to figure out whether the consolation or the desolation is spiritual or natural. Because if I don't have coffee in the morning, then I might have some non-consolation. I might be a little bit upset. Well, that's not spiritual consolation. That's not spiritual desolation. That's just on a human level. But it was just through continuing to pray, continuing to discern. I think that biggest difficulty for me was that kind of culminating point for me was June of 2021. My team is out in Arizona, Eloy, Arizona, and we're jumping out of planes at nighttime with oxygen equipment at 14,000 feet. And for Special Forces Command, they changed their policy where you now needed the vaccine in order to deploy. And at that point, I'd only had maybe one or two soldiers who had the shot. So I had to talk to my guys, what are we going to do? What do you want to do? I know Team Sergeant and I, we're not going to get it. And having lost that mission, then having that peace about, I'm not going to get this. And it was trying to weigh out, because there's sin and then there's virtue. There's also natural level things that you can do wrong. So I was just trying to look at the spectrum of what are the options, what are the solutions I have. Getting the shot for the sake of the aborted fetal cells would be the worst thing to do, right? If you're reveling in that would be the most evil formal cooperation you could do. Maybe you can get it and you can justify it. I could potentially justify it based on what Pope Francis was saying, what the Vatican was saying. I could say, well, I'm trying to follow what my church leaders are saying, which I thought was problematic. But maybe that's a way to maybe do something okay. And then on the other spectrum, there's what's the most perfect thing I can do? I can not get the shot and I can not lie about it. I know there's some folks who got the shot, faked it. I think there's some issues with that, because to me, I think that getting the shot as a Catholic, as someone who believes that these use aborted fetal cells, that would be sinful. And if someone thinks you're sinning, that's where you can lead to scandal. The proper definition of scandal is when your actions, people seeing your actions, can cause them to sin. It's not actually just shocking them. It's actually doing something that can cause others to think it's potentially okay and then lead them to sin. So I just had that kind of grace and peace about, let's just do that most perfect thing. And it definitely stressed me out. I remember getting a twitch, getting some gray hairs, things of that nature, but was just trying to do the best I can, relying on God, talking to my dad, who's very supportive. And there were these networks that we found ourselves in that were supportive. So, praise God, thank God for the other people around me. Very grateful for my team for making it as far as they did. But it's really His grace that got me through this.
I love to talk about leadership, and you were a detachment commander at this time. So how many men are under you at that, and when this came out?
So you can have up to 11 men. As a detachment commander, a full team is 12. I think we might have had like 9, 10, 11 total on the team, because sometimes you might not have like a intel sergeant at a time, or you might be short a delta or something of that nature. So I think it might have been like 10 or 11 at that point.
And so you are the only detachment commander in your group who did not coerce his men. Is that right?
I had the least vaccinated detachment. I don't know what the other detachment commanders were saying. I do remember back in February of 2021, when the shot was available, we could sign up to get the shot. And I looked at the list, and I was the only officer within my company who was not getting the shot. And I know other company commanders were trying to influence their guys to get the shot. I know the group commander held a meeting with all the company commanders, and he asked, raise your hand if you didn't get the shot. If you get the shot, you're a terrible leader. I'm going to get you out of your company. I'm going to get you out of your command. So that was the kind of pressure that people were under. And I don't think there were guys within my group who necessarily stood up to their guys to that same extent.
And it was amazing to me, the pressure put on us over that. And there are a lot of people who argue and say, would say, Chase or John, you're making this a political issue. It shouldn't be a political issue. It's a medical issue. And to that I say, I was never threatened to be kicked out of the military if I was late on a flu shot, if I was late on anything else. There are a lot of things that are tracked in the military. This one had the Eye of Sauron on it for those who like me, are Tolkienites. It was just amazing, the amount of pressure put on this one thing and the amount of conversations that would be generated on this one thing. It was driven from the top down. So that's my answer to people who say, you're trying to make a medical issue a political issue. And I say, no, you're trying to disguise a political issue as a medical issue. I firmly believe, John, this was not about maintaining force readiness. I'm using air quotes here. It was about saying who will do whatever we tell them to do without asking, and who will say, hang on, we actually need to look at who we are and what we say we do.
I do think that there were a lot of foul players at play that were acting just in malfeasance. So you had the drug companies that were trying to make as much money as they could. You had HHS, CDC collaborating with Big Pharma, because we did have some solutions that could have worked. Well, 1, COVID wasn't that dangerous. 2, most of us had already had natural immunity. 3, there are early preventative medicines, treatments like the Zelenko treatment, which could have helped early prevention, but that was dismissed. So was ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. So a number of different problems. So what you have to note is that the CDC, HHS, they were willing to allow people to forego those options, which, one, can put many, many lives in danger. They were pushing remdesivir. They were pushing the breathing machines and things of that nature. So they're willing to allow a number of people to die. They're willing to do so for profit. And I think from this, you also see with religious exemptions, the president, SecDef's guidance, they are trying to rid as many service members as possible. So I don't know if the big scheme machination, because we know how government, how disorganized it is, how chaotic it is, but it could have been a lot of individuals that were trying to work for their own personal gain. And it created just a terrible situation for those of us who are trying to stand up for the Constitution, trying to stand up for our own religious convictions, for our bodily autonomy, our bodily safety, and for just doing what's right.
And so many of those commanders are still in. And for, this will be dropped a few weeks after we're recording, but we're recording the day after the new Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said on camera the Department of Defense's shot mandate was unlawful. He used that word, unlawful. And it's just such a great thing to hear. And yet what goes through my mind next, after, thank God we have a Secretary of Defense who will say this now, is, but every commander, except the ones who've retired out, but the majority of commanders who enforce this thing are still in. Like, how do we recover trust, not just in the military institution, but how do we recover trust in institutions, period? Or are they worth trying to regain trust in after we've seen behind the curtain?
That's a great question. And I think that we have to, look at what is the ideal situation, what would ideal justice look like, and what's practical. What is it that we can actually get after? What can we action? And those of us who signed the Declaration of Military Accountability, we know that that kind of top thing we signed and asked for were court-martials for the officers that we listed on that document, because we do believe it was an unlawful order, that they violated our religious freedoms, and they left many people medically injured by the COVID shot. Now, that would be an amazing thing. I don't know if there's necessarily the appetite for it, but calling it unlawful, acknowledging that is a huge thing. And I think that, you have teachers, if you have a science teacher or a physics teacher, he gives a test to the students, and every student fails the test except for maybe 5%, 10%. Is it the student's fault, or is it the teacher's fault? So we're in an environment within the military where the vast majority of officers, senior leaders, they all failed this test. So we need to look at what is that kind of institutional rot within the military that allowed so many leaders to enforce an unlawful order. So I think we really need to get to the crux of that. I think there should be some accountability for different leaders, and if court-martials is off the table, then perhaps it can be going back into their records, changing their discharges from honorable to general discharges, taking or demoting in rank, taking some retirement pay, keeping them from serving in senior executive service. But even something that is nominal, such as that, even something that is on paper, that would say something, that would make a statement. I mean, it's such a huge statement. I'm extremely grateful for the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, for saying the order was unlawful. I think for many of us, that's more meaningful than any back pay could ever be in encouraging us to consider military service under this administration. So it's a long road ahead. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to continue to try to put ourselves in those positions of influence, trying to encourage and support. We're on the same team as President Trump, as Pete Hegseth, only trying to support that mission and trying to make him understand why it's so essential to rebuilding that trust and what we can do. I think that having some constitutional training, we have so much annual training in the military that's just absolute BS, bogus, that it wouldn't be that bad to have a week dedicated to the Constitution, or a day dedicated to the Constitution, or even if you're just kind of, looking online, going on to Joint Knowledge Online, doing that annual test, clicking what right does that amendment correspond to, et cetera. That would be something beneficial for the service members.
That's a really good point, John. And let me ask, how many times during your military career did you have to do any kind of training on the Constitution?
I don't remember ever doing any training on the Constitution while I was in the military. I know that I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, and that's when you commission, that's when you start ROTC, that's when you promote. But other than that, it's just kind of nice ideology that's not really made practical, that's not put into specific terms. And it's an easy document to read, to understand. It makes sense. We should continue that within our professional military education at different levels to have a better understanding of that level, especially if you're going to take an oath to support and defend it, even with your life. So extremely problematic, the things that we try to make essential and the things that we really put to the wayside.
Yeah, I'll tell you my answer to that question. One time I received a constitutional training, and again, for those listening on audio, I'm using air quotes here, because this training consisted of logging on to a government website and watching a very short animated video, just giving some basic historical facts about the Constitution. And thus I was officially trained that 1 year that my headquarters put out a tasking and said, everyone will watch this video by this point in time so you can be constitutionally trained. And I thought, it caught me off guard because, again, I'd been in the Army like 13, 14 years at that point in time, had never had one. I was like, oh, this is unusual, but it's a good thing. And I never had it again. And yet every year, as you alluded to, there are all these other trainings we have to do. Equal opportunity, which in recent years has devolved into a grievance training. Then EEO and treatment of persons and, The
Sure.
list goes on and on. In my very last unit I was assigned to, there was about, I want to say like 15-ish annual trainings we had to do. And man, those were tracked closely. Like there was a spreadsheet, and if you were not green, like you were getting talkings to, like, why haven't you been to this training or that training? And I couldn't help but think on a few occasions, we swear an oath to this document and we're not required to read it. Now, I've read it because I care about civics. Most people have not, and that's a testament to how bad education is in America today. And why, and so it in some ways it almost is easy to answer the question, why would you have commanders throw aside constitutionality, throw aside the law, throw aside the regulations when they've never read them? Like we saw General Milley, as he was defending the fact that he was willing to sell the nation out to China, he did so under the guise of defending the Constitution. When you don't read it, you can just throw those words, defending the Constitution, at any action you take as justification. And I think we got to turn that around. Far be it from me to tell Secretary Hegseth what his priorities are in such a complex job. But by gum, man, if like a legitimate, hardcore, in-depth, routine constitutional training requirement is not part of the changes in the next 4 years, any changes made are going to be lost.
Well, we also have to get back to having better, or not even, I don't even know when we did it. I've never done it in the military, ethics training. I think that you always have that kind of, low IQ chaplain coming up asking everybody, hey, what's ethics? Or what do you think of when you hear ethics? And they're like, morality, doing the right thing. What's doing the right thing? What you do when no one's looking. I think that we had a chaplain at the qualification course come and ask what ethics was, and I gave like the Aristotelian definition of it, and then he responded with, no, it's doing the right thing when no one's looking. And it's just a circular answer. And I think I was in some joint special operation university course too, and he's trying to say how Kantian and Aristotelian and Mill type of ethics can all work together. I'm like, not really. We want to get to a virtue ethics. So there needs to be just a better understanding of ethics, period. And there needs to be ethical training. A friend of mine, Dan Pace, he's a Green Beret who also didn't get the shot, retired lieutenant colonel, and he wrote a book on ethics, and he's given talks on ethics, and he understands that in order for the military to better execute ethics, we need to have better ethical training. I wouldn't expect my guys to be able to conduct an ambush very well if we never practice it, nor a raid, nor any other kind of operational activity. Yet, if ethics is such an important thing, especially when you're under the pressure of a wartime experience, you're going to have to train these situations.
Yeah, the training is what matters. Like, you can put in the regulations and the rules all day long, but if you don't actually train it, we have this thing in the Army that soldiers do what commanders check. So, in my realm, conventional Army public affairs, there was not anything in the regulation, that's Army Regulation 360-1. There was nothing in there about how to be an ethical communicator. And it just blew my mind when I was on a school tour at Georgetown and I'm studying ethical frameworks from other professional communication associations, which in the years since have failed us as well. But I was just shocked that the Army, this organization that prides itself on ethical advocacy, didn't have a code of professional communication ethics. And so I had a chance to be on a doctrine writing team, and I actually wrote a public affairs code of ethics. I felt like this is my great contribution to the Army. This is what will last. This is my legacy. We're going to make public affairs ethical, and we're never going to lie again, and we're going to be completely truthful, and we're going to do all this great stuff and fix the Army's reputation. And it's in writing. It's in the regulation right now. You can look it up. And nothing has changed culturally. Like, you can put the words on paper, but until you train it, rehearse it, and do it, the words never come off the page.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You gotta, if it's important, you have to train it. You have to go through the basics. And I think that with a lot of the special operation units, people think that we just do such cool training, but no, you have to be masters of the basics, and that's what you have to do. And within the ethical situations, that's something that you have to train, you have to live out in your life. One reason why, I thought it was great when the military had infidelity as adultery is something that's against the Uniform Code of Military Justice, something that you don't really have outside of the military. And if you can't be trustworthy within your marriage, how are you going to be trustworthy within your teammates? If you're going against that close bond. So it's something you have to live out in your life. It's something where we need to make sure we have people of ethical character or strong character entering the military to really just have that culture. And, we can talk about what we need to do in the military, what we need to do in the government, all these other things all day long. But ultimately, if we don't turn to God, if we don't rely on His grace, we'll never turn the country around. We'll never be a light for the world. And by following God's law, which He allows us to know in the natural law, by allowing His grace to come into us, we're going to create an environment of human flourishing. And that's going to allow people to be more receptive to accepting the gospel, to living out those Christian tenets of the faith. But without God, we have nothing. The world's passing away. We can do the best we can outside of it, but we're going to fail utterly.
I encounter a lot of people, John, who they only see the risk in doing the right thing. As the chaplain said, the right thing when no one's looking. It's a whole other thing to do the right thing when everyone is looking, and we learned that as well. But you, in the years since you got out of the Army, held your ground. You've got to have some neat experiences. You've got to meet some neat people.
Yes, that is correct. And I just could never imagine God doing the amazing things He's done in my life. I tried to give it back to Him when I got out of the military. The first thing I did was go on an 8-day silent Ignatian retreat. And then on the feast day of St. Ignatius, just a couple weeks later, had an op-ed published. And through that experience, able to go up to Congress a bunch of times, interact with a lot of people. But I was, most notably, I was Matt Gaetz' guest at the State of the Union, and I was amazing, and I'm extremely grateful for former Representative Matt Gaetz for everything he did for the military, one of the most outspoken advocates for us. But then in October was able to meet President Trump. I joined Veterans for Trump. I was trying to advocate for his presidency online, sharing posts, things of that nature, and found out there would be a Veterans Town Hall in North Carolina. So chose to travel up there, and from that experience was able to sit on stage with him, was able to look at him in the eye across the stage and tell him, Mr. President, I'm John Frankman. I was a Green Beret who was forced out of the military for refusing the COVID shot. The COVID shot was extremely damaging. It kicked thousands out, and now thousands don't want to join, and the military is pushing more woke training. So what will you do to repair the military and hold leaders accountable? And it was just fantastic to hear his response, for him to ask questions of interest to me, ask whether I left the military, whether I got the shot, to get the raucous applause from the audience when I said I did not get the shot. And then when he asked if I would come back, and I said there needs to be accountability, him saying, yeah, we're going to fire their asses. So him kind of understanding that. But what really struck me, really personally, was him saying that they treated people terribly, terribly. I think that there was genuine empathy in his voice when he said that he really does understand how terrible things were for us, and very proud to support this president, very glad that he is our president. And, hoping that we, in our capacity, can help support him by bringing this matter to the attention of Secretary of Defense and others within the administration.
Yeah, that had to be really cool. I got to see the video of you and several other people I admire on that stage. Was slightly envious. Like, I would have loved to have been there. That was just such a cool thing. And Matt Gaetz, man, he's really kind of been our biggest ally when it came to someone in Congress. Like, he was, I actually got to hear him. There's an X space of people in our community discussing this a few months ago, and lo and behold, Matt Gaetz showed up to it and talked, and I was just blown away. Like, he seemed to take a genuine interest in this cause, and so I was grateful to him then. I'm grateful to him for that now. There was another piece of your op-ed, John, that really stood out to me. I want to read it for the benefit of the readers, because I so closely align with it. At this point, I'm quoting John here, I believe that God can use the gifts, talents, and passions He gave me to serve Him in a better way. I also fear that any good I could potentially do in the military would be drastically nullified based on the guidance and leadership coming from politicians and top military brass. And that just hit so close to my heart, John, because that was one of the reasons that I got out when I did. People thought I was crazy because I turned down promotion to do so. A gentleman I'm working with right now just said to me this week, he said, "You turned down a lot of money." And I said, "Yeah, I did." But I really feel like I can do more to serve the nation dressed like this, sitting where I'm sitting right now, than I ever could in uniform. And that's sad that that's the way it is. I would like to see that changed. But, so I think you and I probably had some similar thought processes and a lot of similar reflection in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I will encourage any man, woman who is considering military service to consider joining if that's something that they think God is calling to them to do, where they can do some good. And there are many other peers of mine who are still in who can still do great good. I just thought for myself specifically, especially under the Biden regime, that there really wasn't much I could do. If you just have absolute trash for national defense strategy, how are you going to try to carry out a good national defense strategy? The whole fleet's going in the wrong direction. How are you going to do good in going in that wrong direction, right? And I think that God has just shown how gracious he is. And I felt extremely blessed by him to have all the opportunities I've had since leaving the military to meet and interact with so many congressmen to try to, I've written every member of the House Armed Service Committee from the 22 class, every Senate Armed Service Committee from the 24 class, been able to meet the president, had a brief congressional run, which was an amazing experience. And God will use whatever gifts, opportunities. You just open yourself up to him slightly, and he's going to put you in that right position to influence and do whatever you're supposed to do.
Yeah, well, it's been good to see you not sitting on your laurels, still working hard, being a committed voice to this cause. It'd be so easy for people to say, "Why don't you guys just move on?" And you can't just move on from these things. When you have the chance to try to help. And to try to bring light to things so that we can remember them and hopefully not repeat them. That's what we have to do. John, we're running up against the clock here. I do want to bring up one point there where we intersect a little bit. You did your master's in systematic theology from Mount St. Mary's University. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, Mount St. Mary's Seminary.
Yeah, man, that's so cool. A few years ago, I got into studying ancestry. And my ancestry trails took me to the campus of Mount St. Mary's University there in Maryland. Beautiful, beautiful campus. As it turned out, I had ancestors up my mother's side of the family tree that back in the 1700s donated the land that school now sits on. And it was just really kind of a neat day to walk around there and try to imagine, okay, I actually have family roots and ties to the area. So that's really cool. And I know Chris Annandale, who teaches philosophy up there. So just a gorgeous place. John, as we're wrapping up here, where can people find you and learn more about your work, connect, help you out?
Yeah. If folks want to follow me, I encourage them to follow Jesus Christ first. If you still want to do that afterwards, you can find me on my website, johnfrankman.com. You can find me on Twitter at johnfrankmanfl, John Frankman, Florida. Or on Instagram, Johnny_Franks, Johnny with one N. So those are some places I'm located, and greatly appreciate everybody's support.
Well, John has done great work, not only in the military, out of the military, and I know you're going to continue doing great work for years to come. I'm anticipating it's not going to be very long before I'm saying, back when I could call him direct and get him to come on my show, probably, I'm sure very soon it will be echelons of gatekeepers. So thanks for making time for me now. This has been really good, and I'm grateful for all that you do, man.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chase. I really appreciate having me on your podcast.
You betcha. So I'm coming to you today from the Herzog Foundation Studios in Smithville, Missouri. To learn more about the amazing work that the Herzog team does to catalyze Christian education nationwide and to bring you great voices like John's, go to herzogfoundation.com. If you'd like to learn more about me and see some of my other work, you can head on over to chasespears.com. Here on Finding Your Spine, I work hard to try to bring you the stories and principles of courage, but I can't put them into practice. That's your job. So get to it. Find your spine. Thanks for listening.
Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Finding Your Spine.